let's go into someone who has really been making some headway in the news. So this is from Business Insider Africa, from soldier to symbol, how Ibrahim Traoré, I think I'm saying it correctly, is becoming Africa's most loved and unapologetic leader. Um, he's been in the news a lot and has really not really been in the news, interestingly enough. I've noticed that this brother has not been in the news more than he's been in social media. And I think that's very interesting. But let's read what's said about him. Ibrahim Traoré has became the transnational president of Burkina Faso after a military coup in September 2022. Under Traoré's administration, Burkina Faso has pursued a revolutionary and anti-colonial agenda, expelling French soldiers and strengthening ties with Russia. That's when he really got on my radar. Burkina Faso has nationalized its wealth by creating a state mining corporation. Now, right away, this brother, a Muslim brother, he is being seen. I think last week they had like a day of solidarity with him. It was like international. And he is on the radar, obviously, of world leaders, not only because, as it says here, he expelled French soldiers, he's forming ties with Russia, but also he's going back. He's a leader for the people. This is how it's coming from some. Now, we do have some other people saying negative things about him from the West, but we're not even really going to pay attention to that. In terms of him like making certain things like the vehicles that he chooses to drive and that the leaders are choosing to drive. Basically, he's not going the way of the leaders who hold the wealth of the nation at the expense of the well-being of the people. And he is coming, I'm just going to use that same expression, on the radar of members of high up in this Western government and world, because he's a problem. He's a problem. They're seeing him as a problem for their agenda. The French have a strong presence in West Africa. And in places like Senegal, again, in these other, they're very, I think if you do business with Senegal, they get like 80% of whatever that transaction is. It's something like that, some terrible number. So this is still like the French, the British too, even in the United States, these colonialist powers still exist. That's the point that I'm getting at. Even the issue there in Palestine, it is a colonialist issue, essentially. So this idea of the Western world having dominance over all of and really what I'm speaking about now, I'm speaking about Western European nations and the United States of America having power and dominance over all of the other nations of the world. That has been something that we've been in struggle with for some time now. And we know historically that even though the politically there's been a separation, economically there necessarily hasn't, militarily perhaps there hasn't. So what this brother represents in the popular minds of the people is really, like they say, really in the title, he's a symbol. He represents the change. Like, to put out the French is something that's big. Now, a friend of mine was making this point that I think we should all take into consideration. This has happened before. We have had strong leaders rise up on the continent of Africa and take on Western colonial imperialist powers. But what we have today that we should really be thankful for, and that's why I'm bringing it on this platform today, this is the first time where the whole world can watch. We had television before, we had radio before that, but now we can watch the whole thing play out live. And because we couldn't do that before, there was always a possibility of, and there are, not only was it a possibility for, but it actually happened. We never get the whole story. We always get an agenda. So when it comes to Gaddafi, for example, someone who they're relating, who they're connecting to this brother, when it comes to other people like Idi Amin, etc., I'm not saying right or wrong, up or down, right or left for any one of them. Fidel Castro, I'm not saying anything about, I'm not making a judgment about anyone in any direction. What I am saying, though, is that the bulk of the American and the Western public was subject to media of the Western world. In other words, we saw the world through the lens of the Western eye. And today, that is no longer the case. Today, we are in an environment where we can hear from the globe, and we are intimately connected by way of this technology to really see what's going on. So it's really a judgment day of sorts for world powers. So a lot of young people in the diaspora and just globally are watching this young man, this young brother, and many of them, and older ones too. As a matter of fact, there were some elder people who first put me on to them. For the first time, we're able to sit and watch things play out. So the assassination attempt, there were several on his life. They're reported right away. We're able to get to the plots to foil his work are being exposed, and the hypocrisy that we know exists in these colonialist powers that we know are there, they're being exposed out in the open. This is the beauty of today's world. And I repeat, as Muslims, it's very important for us to be aware of this time, and we should know what our assignment is in this time. So let me read a little bit. I don't think I'll read it all. He says he came to power on September 30th, 2022, after conducting a military coup that deposed the then interim president, Hall Henry Sendalgo Damiba. I hope I pronounced that right, who had himself gained an office in a coup just 8 months earlier. Traoré is an artillery officer who had served in the army's counter-terrorism operations against jihadist insurgents plaguing Burkina Faso and the Sahel region. As mentioned earlier, he led the second military coup in 2022, ousting Lieutenant Colonel Paul Henry Sandalgo Damibo, who had previously come to power in a January 2022 coup. He and fellow officers accused the previous leadership of failing to deal effectively with the country's worsening security situation. Since assuming power, Traoré has positioned himself as a revolutionary figure using anti-colonial and pan-Africanist language. So this has been the case for African leaders for a while, to use pan-Africanist and anti-colonial language. Who wouldn't? I mean, no one wants to be colonized. And we know as members of the diaspora that for some reason the children of Africa have been put down more than any other group. That's still with us. Like the other great thinker in Africa, I can't even think of his name now. He was in Kenya when we were there. He gave a riveting. But he's a very dynamic speaker. But here, Africa is the richest continent. China, the United States, the French, everyone is there for wealth. Yet the population is the poorest. How is that the case? That is obviously planned. That is obviously planned, and it is obviously also having to do with the leaders selling out their own people. But let's just keep going. It says gaining inspiration for Burkina Faso's legendary former leader, Thomas Sankara. More than just a presentation, the revolutionary leader has demonstrated his anti-colonial sentiments. In the 3 years since being interim leader of the West African country, Ibrahim Traoré has been on a rapid campaign to rid his country of any traces of Western influence. Now, someone told me that they tried to take his life like 22 times already. Have you all heard that? 22 was a lot. See, when they tried to assassinate him that many times, then that lets you know. Uh, um, okay, yes, thank you. So that's pretty deep. I mean, that's pretty deep. That lets you know that the brother obviously represents something real. You don't try to get rid of someone who's not a real threat. He says, okay, rid his country of any traces of Western influence. This has been done by nationalizing local wealth and expelling French soldiers from Burkina Faso, noting that they wish to tackle their security problem independently. In place of French partnerships, the radical leader has opted instead for Russian friendship. This has happened also. China has positioned itself on the African continent in a unique way. The African nations were really being mistreated again by the United States and other Western nations. And it's really opened the door for China to enter there. Now, there is some critique about the role China is playing. I believe, I don't have all the information, but in so much as I can tell, I think a lot of that is the problem of the African leaders themselves. You know, you can have our resources and build us a soccer stadium. That's just foolishness. In his administration so far, these moves have gathered for him a very high unofficial approval rating, not just in Burkina Faso, but across Africa and amongst Africans in the he says in diaspora. His economic reforms, as alluded to earlier, Burkina Faso is aiming for more control over its resources. Now, what nation does not want that? The United States. Just I'm using that just because we're from the United States. We're in the United States. We don't want anyone controlling our natural resources. That's natural. Just like any man, like no man wants another man to have authority over his wife and children, to have authority over his home. This is natural. So the Europeans, see, we must not forget that the European colonialist is an artificial, grafted intellect. He sees himself as God. That's artificial. He sees himself as God, and he sees himself as being qualified to manage the life of the whole globe. And he wants to reshape the global community in his image. And the Western grafted artificial thinking will speak about world peace. We'll speak about the world order being together, but it's only if he's in the rule, if he's in the leadership, if he's making the rules, if he's calling the shots. So he has a what do you call it? A God concept, but what do you call that? A God complex. So this brother is a problem because he wants something for his people that everybody wants: control of their own future, self-determination, so on and so forth, and is not willing to rob the people of what should be theirs. That's what it appears to be so far. Because what the Western nations will do, and the record is clear that they will do it, they will bait you into corruption to sell out your own people for their interests, yet claim to be the representatives of human dignity and freedom, so on and so forth. It's hypocrisy. And like I said, this is not the first time that a leader is standing up against it, but it's the first time that the whole world can witness and take a side in real time. They can't get away with what they used to get away with. He says, as such, he has changed its mining legislation, creating a new state mining corporation. That's French. They got to get rid of their French language too. Okay. This move immediately scored points with people who have been advocating for a pro-national government where the country's wealth is distributed primarily within its borders. Burkina Faso utilized this company to obtain control of 2 industrial gold mines formerly controlled by a London-listed Endeavour Mining. Come on now. In April 2025, Burkina Faso's military-led government granted an industrial mining license to the Russian company Nord Gold for a new gold project. This move is projected to contribute 51.5 billion francs. This is equivalent to 89 million to Burkina Faso state budget over its lifespan, along with an additional 7.06 billion to the country's mineral wealth fund, according to the Council of Ministers. Okay, so let's skip a little bit. His geopolitical stand. Burkina Faso has been locked in a deadly conflict with Islamist militants since 2015, and as a result had called for international assistance to combat the issue. However, since taking power, Ibrahim Traoré has expelled said foreign backers. So they were calling help from outside. He said, no, get rid of them, noting that they had been very ineffective in dealing with the security challenge. Now, notice this is a Muslim brother fighting against what they call Islamists, which is very important. Because when now in the public language, far too often we hear about the Islamists and they really conflate it with just Muslims being the problem. But here is a Muslim leader in a predominantly Muslim environment fighting these extremists. Why wouldn't the world celebrate this? In January 2023, the 400-member Operation Sabre, which was sent in 2009 to combat armed organizations such as Al-Qaeda in the area, was given a 1-month ultimatum to leave. This decision was made to create a self-sustaining security infrastructure, which so far has come with some drawbacks. Of course it would. 2024 alone saw the country suffer 5 of the most deadly terrorist attacks. Of course it would. The foreign help is gone, but you got to start by getting on your feet. Nevertheless, the Burkina Faso leader insists on finding help outside of an institution that had historically colonized its people. Currently, Burkina Faso is looking at military cooperation with Russia, and negotiations are showing positive signs. And perhaps this is what the real issue is: the friendliness with Russia. This move, so maybe it's two things. Not only this step for this African under this African leader for African nations to have their own sense of self-determination, but also them partnering with Russia. This move works on several levels, especially considering that the people of Burkina Faso have welcomed the idea of Russian partnership. And this goes on and on and on. I don't want to take up too much time with that. But again, I repeat, these things are very important for us to take note of. We have to know what's going on in the world. I have one more, but I'll save it for tomorrow because what I wanted to cover is 7 o'clock. So I want to get started with what we have here. I want to take that first half hour for what we just did. But why this is important, we have to know the shifting landscapes. We have to know the global landscape because we're no longer living just in a nation. We're living in the global community. And as members of the global community, the Ummah of Muhammad has a special role. And I would even say that the Muslims in America have a special role in light of this new global community.